In addition, we looked at what else do we have our hands on that can help business. And one of the issues is business travel. When the ambassador spoke at the auto show at a roundtable last February with auto sector folks and economic development folks from U.S. states that have auto parts or businesses connected to the auto sector there, and asked them, well, what are your concerns? We had about 15 people in the room, and every one of them said business travel in one way or another, trying to, in a timely way, get somebody urgently down to fix a plant in Tennessee, and we can't start the lineup until we get our expert down there, or some other kind of combination. And so we took that back and we looked at it, and at a time when unemployment is very high in the United States, there's no appetite in the United States to, if you put it this way, try and help foreign workers get into the United States and take jobs. That's not what we're talking about here, though. When we looked into it, if you have an expert from Magna or from some company up here, actually on both sides of the border, and they can't get down there and fix the line, the workers in Tennessee can't go to work or can't work overtime, and they're getting fewer hours, so we're really hurting American employment if we're not letting this expert go and do the work. So what we did is we found a way that we could make the process much, much easier for companies that do this on a repetitive basis. So what we started is basically a 2Q process for investor trading and treaty trader and treaty investor visa categories. It's called the E category. So that if you're a company that does this regularly, you come, you get qualified once as a company, you bring your legal documents, we study them, we register you, and then every time you have to send someone in the future, instead of it taking 6 weeks, it takes 3 or 4 days. We've got that going and it's working, and I think it's going to make a tremendous difference to the productivity of these companies. We now are just launching another program to try and make it faster for truck drivers to get visas. Canadian truck drivers don't need visas to drive in the States, going in and coming out. But third country nationals, landed immigrants do. And we also said, well, why don't we have a queue for the companies that do this a lot, where they have drivers that are known, and we can spend our time worrying about fraud, et cetera, on other categories. So we're doing that as well, and I think that will also help businesses. A third focus is going to my comment about China and India and people looking abroad. One of the frustrating things for me when I got here was first of all, finding out how few American companies export at all. 95% of American companies don't export anywhere. And of those that export, more than half of them export to only one country. And often it's anecdotal that they export. They didn't have a plan, but somebody knocked on their door, so they said, sure, I'll sell it to you. So we need to get Americans more focused on exporting in general, and that's the President's National Export Initiative is doing that throughout the states. And we're also trying to energize the economic development folks in the U.S. states to pay attention to Canada. Again, my joke about Canada, when we have all these new governors elected and their staffs all say, we should go to China. And I always say to their staff, you should go to China, but you should come to Canada 3 times first. Because if you look at the numbers, that's what it means to your economy. And some of them get it, and increasingly more of them are getting it. So we're very excited. We had the governor of Florida here in March. And of course, Canada is buying Florida slowly. So very, very important that he be up there. We have very important investment relationships there. And we have also commerce and trade relationships there. We're glad of that. The governor of Michigan was here, was in Ottawa a couple of weeks ago to talk at an innovation conference, at which, among other things, he noted that he has a plan to move the long-delayed bridge project forward. It's a Michigan issue, so the federal government can't do anything until Michigan makes a decision, but he told everyone he has a plan, and he's talking about months, not years. So that's very good. The governor of Vermont was here a couple of weeks ago for a cities initiative, although he joked the only state in the United States that doesn't have a city, which is not really true, but cities in Vermont are relatively small. And it was interesting, when my team and I met with them, and we looked at, well, what is Vermont doing? And they're trading a lot with Canada, but it's all with Quebec. And I said, I don't know Vermont that well, but a lot of Vermont has a lot in common with parts of Ontario, and there's a lot of interest in issues such as high technology for green energy, pelletizing wood products, etc. Having visited Thunder Bay 3 times, probably beat a lot of you in that. There's a lot of interest in those kind of things, so Vermont should look at that. So we're moving on that. There's a new flight being launched tomorrow, a direct flight from Toronto Island Airport to Burlington, Vermont. And I told the governor, that's a great thing for the vacation thing, and we want to push tourism, but let's use this to push a wider agenda. And so we're welcoming a delegation from Vermont tomorrow, and then we're going on the initial flight and meeting the governor down in Burlington, and I hope that people from Mississauga and from other parts of Ontario will take advantage of this. And And I said to the governor, tell the New England Governors Association to also focus on Ontario. Again, a lot of their trade is with the Atlantic provinces and with Quebec. There's some logical energy connections there, but there are other logical connections, and people should look at Ontario. Now, the flip side of that is Ontario. I think while Americans don't know enough about Canada, and we suffer from the same syndrome of ignoring the things that are working and looking to Asia a little bit more than we should look at Asia, but we should also look at Canada. I would say, forgive me anyone from the government of Ontario, I think Ontario probably has not paid enough attention to American states and looking at its trade agenda in recent years. Obviously, Ontario has done a lot in terms of funding connection to the new international crossing that we hope is going to be built in Detroit. But in other places, in other areas, I think Ontario's focused a lot on Asia. And I think now, from talking to government officials since the election, there is going to be a renewed focus on trade with the United States. There's going to be more trade delegations. I'm told that the Premier wants to double trade delegations this coming year compared to last year, with a big focus on the United States. I think the fact that there's a minority government and that it's easier to get back for a vote from New York than it is from Shanghai might have something to do with it. But I also think it's, when we recognize the size of the relationship, that there's more to be done. So I'm very encouraged about that. There's talk in New York State about reviving the idea of having an Ontario-New York summit. There was one about 10 years ago, and the Lieutenant Governor, I'm told, is interested in having that again. Once the Ontario government is totally settled, because they still have to name deputy ministers to particular functions. So in the new year, we'll be talking to that, and I'm very encouraged about that. So we've got a lot going on in Ontario. Ontario, I think, is going to focus on Michigan, New York, Illinois, and California as four states that are very important. In addition to the governors that have come, we have some governors still coming. The governor of Illinois is coming in March for a big trade show, and he's bringing a trade delegation, and we're going to try and make the most of that, and I hope some of you will be involved in the events that he has. The governor of Georgia is coming in July. Some of his staff, in fact, is arriving today to talk to us about arranging that visit, and we'll be pushing that. I've been struck by the connections between Ontario and the southern southeastern states of the United States. Obviously, Florida has that investment real estate angle, but you also have auto production in Tennessee. You have big investment and trade relationships in the Carolinas. Georgia, that's the governor of Georgia is coming here because it's an important market. So I think, again, despite the fact that we have this great relationship and that our trade is by far the biggest in the world, there's more to be done. And energizing Americans or getting them to just look at Canada is one thing we can do to support that. And getting Ontarians to also focus on those states is another thing that's very important. And I would like you all to help me with that. So let me now turn to the border. The Beyond the Border and Regulatory Cooperation Council action plans that were released this week. It's concrete evidence of what I was talking about, the fact that this happened. If you read some critics might say, well, they could have done more, there are other things that could have been done. But when you think of the world agenda and how tough things are, the fact that you could get the President and the Prime Minister, they launched this initiative in February with a vision statement, and then that you could get, in less than a year, action plans out of the bureaucracy which are very concrete, which have timelines to move forward on this, is an incredible achievement given how tough things are and how many other things are going on. Politics occasionally break out in Washington, occasionally in Ontario as well. You've got wars going on, you've got people looking at the European crisis and wondering how we're going to do this. But credit to the importance of the relationship, the fact that the President and the Prime Minister get along very well, the fact that we have two incredibly activist, results-oriented ambassadors. Your ambassador in Washington, who's a former Premier of Manitoba, who knows the United States very well, and our ambassador in Ottawa, who's very action-oriented, former litigator, who worked in the White House and really knows how to get things done. So the fact that we did this at all is a great achievement, and I think you should see it in that light. It would have been very easy to simply be consumed by our inboxes in the government of the United States, given the crisis situation we face. But to their credit, the two governments said, look, we have a crisis in terms of unemployment in the United States, worries in Canada because, if the United States coughs, Canada gets pneumonia. This is one of the ways to address these things. So you want to tie up with your friends more tightly when things are difficult, not say, I've got to deal with this crisis, I can't deal with you. In fact, this project is going to help deal with the worst pressures we're facing in the United States, which is jobs and unemployment, also the issue of security, and doing it together. And as the ambassador notes, this vision statement, which was a beyond-the-border vision for perimeter security and economic competitiveness. We're done with this argument, although commentators can still ask it, which are you going to focus on, security or trade? We're going to focus on both, and we're not going to have more security until we have better agreements on trade, and we're not going to have better trade until we line up better on security. There has been progress in the last 10 years, and since 9/11, we've learned a lot of lessons, and that's why the two governments decided to launch this in this particular way, from the top down, in terms of telling everybody what's got to be done, and then talking to stakeholders about how we're going to implement it. So it's very exciting. The document is about 40 pages long, and you can read it on the DHS website, the Beyond the Border portion, and the regulatory part is on the Office of Management and Budget portion. And one thing that's very important is that there are comment procedures in the United States, and you don't have to be from the United States to add your comments there. That process has begun. There was a comment period when the vision statement was launched, but now that there's something to react to, concrete plan, I encourage all of you to get on there and list your comments. Organize yourselves as you wish. Have a comment from the Mississauga Board of Trade, from your industry associations, etc. The more you put into the process, the more likely it is that the bureaucrats are going to understand the key things of the key priorities of the private sector.